Hi, you're watching Mindshifting Moments, a show created to help destigmatize the psychedelic industry through transparent conversation and getting answers to your questions by those experts with hands on experience. I'm your host, Margaret Williamson, head of partnerships at Nucleus, a venture studio creating brands that educate people, aggregate data, and activate engagement inside the psychedelic sector. I'm so excited for today's conversation because it really brings us back to the reason why we're here. Why do we need a show that helps destigmatize psychedelic medicine? And long before Nucleus entered that conversation, there were individuals and organizations fighting that fight, the fight that they believe is part of your constitutional rights. To help us answer this question, I have a wonderful guest today. I'm so excited to share his experiences with you all. Zappy Zapolin, concierge to the stars. Welcome, Zappy. How are
Hey, night.
you?
Great to be here. Excited.
So good to see you again. I have had the pleasure and opportunity to spend some time with you in IRL, right, in real life, and I highly recommend it to everyone. But for those of the many that don't get that opportunity, we're so excited to have you here digitally to share some experience and wisdom with us today. So yeah, let's hop into it. We're here today to discuss, you have an organization that you've created, the Mind Army. But before we even jump into what is the Mind Army, which is today's big question, why do we need an army? Where did this come from? Give us a quick origin.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And I would say, right now we have a couple of major wars that we really need to pay attention to. One of them is fentanyl. And this is a very different situation than we've ever dealt with before. And we have to use these tools, these natural tools, these technologies to address the mental health situation and the addiction situation.
Mhm.
And so we really can't keep people from getting addicted to these things because they have a surgery or something happens, they get the medicine from the pharmacy, the opioids and things, and then they become addicted. Maybe they can't get them anymore. They get them on the street, and then eventually they're on fentanyl and they're addicted. We can't really stop that. There's hundreds of thousands, millions of people that's happening to. And so we have to address it with something that can break the addiction. And ibogaine, a plant medicine, is known to be able to break an opiate or meth or crack addiction, alcohol, cigarettes, and it's a powerful tool that we have. And so what the Mind Army is up to these days is we're basically saying we need to, in the mental health challenge that we have coming out of COVID, with 100,000 people dying of overdoses, 100,000 people committing suicide, we need major action taken right now as a society. And these tools are available. They've been proven safe. And to your point, why do we have to have the army? Well, 55 years ago, the government started to make these things illegal, and they said we have to study these for safety, which made a lot of sense at the time. But what happened was 55 years went by, and you weren't allowed to do the science. Doctors weren't able to use these freely, and in that happening, we had a situation where they were taken off the table for society. And this is a great tragedy because these things had been used previously very effectively with psychology and coaching and all these kinds of things. And so we now have this crisis, and the silver lining on the pandemic is that people are really looking at mental health for the first time and saying, how are we going to address this differently than what got us into it? Yeah. And so the Mind Army is calling for legalization of these compounds to be able to be studied and for doctors to be able to use them, given that we're in this mental health addiction crisis moment, coming out of the pandemic with all kinds of new PTSD that we're all experiencing. Exactly. So I don't see any other way, just on my soapbox here, Margaret. First, I feel like we're having an empathy crisis right now where people want to feel and be connected to things, but they're so distracted with technology and media and everything happening. they can't connect empathetically. And when you have a psychedelic experience, that happens. And the only other way I've ever seen it happen that somebody gets instantly more empathy is that they would have a near-death experience, which is not obviously reliable, but a major breakthrough psychedelic experience in the right set and setting with the right people. It's transformative no matter what's happened in your life. And we need that right now. Veterans, all kinds of people who are suffering right now. We have the tools. We just have to access them.
Wow, right? I mean, you said so much, and I think it got to really the heart of the question, right? When we think about an army and other terms, they protect all people, right?
Yeah.
There's not an army that only is going to say, I'm only going to protect people that live in this one neighborhood, that they're really called to protect the whole population. And I think sometimes we think that psychedelics are just for a certain part of the population. And you really just clearly laid out reasons why really it should be an experience that potentially everyone, should encounter in their lifetime. But right, let's start with those in most need. And so that takes me right back up to the top of the pyramid when we talk about, you said, these major wars that are going on. And I was looking through your guys' website and something stuck out to me. And, you have this great acronym, not great, but it sums it up, that there's a sad epidemic going on here, and sad with long A's, because it's suicide, addiction, anxiety, and depression, right? And then inside of that, right, we split those two apart. I want us to dig in and shift some minds around addiction to begin with. I think a lot of times I'll use myself as an example, right? When I hear people talk about, treatment facilities or having to go to recovery clinics, I've never had to personally deal with an addiction that was labeled something that I needed to go recovery for. That doesn't mean, right, that I don't have addictions in my life that are not in my best interest, right? But I think most people think, oh, they're talking about heroin, they're talking about crack, they're talking about the people I see out on the street corners. And yes, people should help them, right? And they should, right? Those people should have access to help. But what we also need to consider are those 200 million people that are addicted and prescribed medicines that, like you said, the addiction is unavoidable.
Yeah.
And that's the part that
now addiction has now become unavoidable by society. Some people would say we're basically at war with China, and China is sending fentanyl, which doesn't even come from plants. So, this much can kill the whole state. And you're getting to this point where it's being shipped in. And I think if, somebody sees it that way, then it's basically trying to kill millions of youth, which is what it can do if we don't actively take a proactive step. So this is a war of the mind. This is like education. And I'm just saying, I don't think there's a big conspiracy out there to keep these plant medicines from people. I think it's just a straight up lack of knowledge. And in the same way that the doctors who, quite frankly, don't really even know about nutrition, which could solve most of the problems they're dealing with, they don't know about that. They've had 1 or 2 weeks of that in med school. It's the most important thing. So we shouldn't think that they understand these psychedelic medicines. They don't. So we have to bring it to them, bring the information, and also bring a form of psychedelics that they can deal with. And I'm involved with a company called Psycheceutical, which is the best of psychedelics meets the best of pharmaceuticals. And basically we have some patents that work in the pharma space. We brought them over to the psychedelic space, and they're really powerful. It's this is going to be able to control dosing. And that means any company we can work with in co-opetition and help them to dose in a way that's exactly like the pharma, so that we can make them feel comfortable. And I think, Buckminster Fuller, the futurist, he always said, if you don't like a system, don't try to tear it down, just build a better system and it'll overtake that. And that's what psychedelics are right now, because everybody agrees this is about mental health. This is not about recreation or that kind of thing. This is about straight up mental health and addiction right now. And we need this.
And we so do, right? So let's talk about what's keeping us from getting that adopted. And you talk about, right, there's a lot of controversy between marrying psychedelics with big pharma and pharmaceuticals. Um, let's talk about, why would someone say, hey, no, don't do that. Keep them out of this conversation.
Yeah, I really think because of their massive distribution, if we want this to happen on a global scale where we could raise human consciousness by enough people having one of these experiences, emerging with more empathy, and then being as part of a society that's, higher conscious, and that at that level, if we get a critical mass of that, we could solve any problem we have as a society really easily. So I think, like, when I hear bad things in the world and people are like, oh my God, Ukraine, what are we going to do? How do we, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my goodness, as soon as we can, we need to give those people ketamine to deal with their PTSD that they have. Let's get, the ability to do millions of ketamine treatments over there as soon as possible. One of the companies that I'm involved with, we're working towards some kind of a program in Ukraine to be giving these people the ketamine in order to, disrupt that PTSD they have so they can go forward. And hopefully that dispute ends soon and we can actually, get everybody, because, I know people watching may or may not know too much about ketamine, but, this is a very powerful technology that we have. And because it's a Western medicine FDA approved Schedule 3 compound, meaning it's understood to have a significant medical benefit, but the government's classified it as potentially being addictive. And so in reality, it's not an addictive thing. If you give a drug addict a bottle of ketamine, they're going to use it all. But of this 100,000 plus people who've come in for infusions in the last few years for depression, anxiety, PTSD, those people don't get addicted. So we have this compound that literally turns on your neural connection. It makes you neuroplastic. And when ketamine metabolizes, it turns into this hydroxynorketamine, which is actually building new neural pathways in the brain. So every time you're doing it, you're enhancing your brain power. And so veterans, I have a nonprofit that's called the Mind Army. I started it with Warren Gumpel from Keta MD, and him and I have given out over 500 free treatments to veterans who have PTSD. And some of these guys, one of the guys who we have a video of, he was on 22 medications from the VA. He was homicidal and suicidal. He was trying to get in a shootout with the police and things. And after his first ketamine treatment, he said he got up and 45 minutes later and he felt like he had hope for the first time. And then he said he went home and he hugged his kids and he felt love for the first time in 10 years. And now he's not on those meds and he's doing his regular boosters and things of ketamine. And it's like, we have this incredible thing that was basically, it was found because in Vietnam and war, they were doing amputations out in the battlefield and they were using different anesthetics in the battlefield. And they realized after the war that the people that had the ketamine anesthetic during the medical procedure, those people didn't commit suicide, but the other people were committing suicide at a really high rate. So they were like, what's going on here? They brought it to Yale University. They did a huge study. They realized that a high dose is an anesthetic, but at a low dose, you can basically break depression. Their number from Yale is over 70% effective against treatment-resistant depression. And so to have ketamine, this Western medicine already available and approved to treat people in a triage and help them have this experience of going inside and being in present moment awareness, where there's no future, there's no past, you're just in the present moment. And what happens is in that, and all the chatter slows down, and you like take this big breath and you're like, wow, like I just took a breath, the breath that like everybody needs to take that nobody's taking right now. It's like these psychedelic compounds allow you to take that breath. And then when you, in the hours after, it metabolizes and you're growing new neural pathways in the brain around trauma and depression, which could have been inherited, could be in your DNA. My feeling is the ketamine is such a high frequency, it's like a frequency, and we're all just a frequency of atoms. That's what I saw in my very first and most epic psychedelic experience. Was I was just looked at my hand and I was trillions of atoms, and they were just vibrating at a certain frequency. And I looked at my friend and he was the same atoms, just a slightly different frequency. I looked at the table, same atoms, different, and I was like, oh my God, I'll never unsee that we're in this frequency thing, and everything's frequency. So when you take a psychedelic or you eat sugar or take some caffeine, you put that energy, that frequency into yours, and then you have to like synthesize it. And the ketamine, because it's a very high frequency, and basically people say and speculate that maybe you're even like shaking off your pineal gland in your brain that has crystals in there that are taking all the frequency from outside of your body and inside your body, and that's where the messages are all happening in there. And they say it can get calcified maybe with fluoride or different environmental things, and the ketamine frequency is so high that I feel like, the speculation is it like shakes the crust off of these crystals, and now you're vibrating at a very more your own frequency. And lastly, I want to tell you that I gave this, a doctor gave this in Los Angeles to a adopted person who was having a lot of trouble with addiction and depression and suicidal ideation. And after he gave the treatment and we filmed it with the doctor, he said for the first time ever, he felt like he knew who he was and that he was at his own original vibration. And, that's just, kind of one of these magical things that you see with the ketamine, because as I say, it's a technology, and we probably, our brains right now are not set up to handle this level of technology and information coming constantly. We have to do like a leap, like a biological leap of our brain. And to do this, I really believe these super high frequency compounds that we have, that they have the ability to, put you into present moment awareness, reconnect you to the miracle that we're in, and come out with more empathy. If we can get a critical mass of those people, there's no problem we couldn't solve. And we could even think into the future, like, oh, what about water in 50 years? Oh yeah, let's think about that, So I'm encouraging everybody to take advantage of this opportunity. Do not let people who don't know tell you right now that alcohol is good, tobacco is good, but somehow psilocybin mushrooms are bad and they're off the table, even if you're in a crisis or your family member may be depressed or suicidal or in pain or whatever it is. I don't accept that. We're not living in that paradigm. And people always say like, well, maybe the FDA just needs more information and more testing and stuff. And it's like, no, the situation is that if the FDA, who put these things on Schedule 1, which means no medical benefit, highly potential for addiction, they put this on there. But meanwhile, cigarettes are not on Schedule 1 and they're highly addictive and they have no medical benefit. So either cigarettes are in Schedule 1 or we're talking about outdated science and information. And so when Michael Pollan's Netflix special came out a few weeks ago, it really changed things. It's really gotten, because he's a 60-year-old guy who never did anything, and now he's living this peak performance life that he's sharing with everybody. And people are realizing that it's not too late. Even if you're 60, 70, 80 years old, if you can tap into the healing power of psilocybin mushrooms or ketamine for mental health or ibogaine to break an addiction, this is the best time ever to be alive, because the science already exists. We just have to educate the establishment and the medical system and create this new thing. So I applaud you guys for leading on education, because this is what it's all about. People just don't know. It's not that they're, trying to keep us from something good.
Okay. And I love that perspective, right? Because I think it's easy to sort of buy into the conspiracy theory portion of it, especially when you look at situations like, okay, well, why is tobacco and alcohol and fentanyl and all these other antidepressant medicines that they're able to call medicines that just by default are addictive,
Yeah.
So it's like, well, what is how is our government allowing these properties, but they've said no to this? And I think a lot of people were still trusting at heart. And so that's where a lot of the misconceptions around psychedelics are coming from. And you're saying,
Yeah.
hey, it's a lack of knowledge, right? It's a lack of information.
I'm going to tell you my urgency, because I think like I could just kick back and could be like, this is going to be great when this stuff comes out and everybody gets to it. But I'm really motivated. I heard Ray Kurzweil, the futurist, speak in person at a Harvard Business School event. And what he was saying was in the year 2045, humans will be in singularity, connected, their brain connected to the internet, with the cloud, with AI running calculations on it. And he said, if you have that set up in the year 2045, the average person will be 1 billion times more intelligent than you are right now. And people go, oh, wow, that's so exciting. But it is, but it's also very scary, because that means that any of us could destroy a city or the world or whatever it is. And you don't want some, high school kid, imagine, breaks up with their boyfriend or girlfriend in some situation and they go, oh, I'm going to destroy Miami today, and they can do it. And it's like, we can't have that. We have to raise consciousness now. We can't wait till 2044 and go, oh my God, what are we going to do? We got to raise consciousness. We got to get as many people to have this experience, emerge with more empathy. And I think now that you have psilocybin, the government saying that's probably going to be out in 24 months. MDMA is going to be out in 24 months. That this is an emergency situation, and we have the tools. We just really have to get, as a society, really strong. And I want to invite people to join the Mind Army, support the Mind Army, mindarmy.org, because we have an incredible legal team, of which the top 5 best lawyers in the psychedelic industry that are going to affect change. Our first thing we're doing is we're going for the descheduling of ibogaine, because it never should have been on the schedule in the first place. It's proven non-addictive, so it shouldn't be on. Rick Doblin, founder of MAPS, him and I had a conversation, and he inspired me for the Mind Army to take that descheduling of ibogaine on, because it shouldn't be there as a mistake. And we need it right now for this opiate crisis and the fentanyl situation. We declaring war on fentanyl, and we have the tool. It's ibogaine. And coming back to the amazing for-profit opportunity that I think we all have, is anybody watching this right now, you're in the top 1% of the investing public to be able to say, I understand this, I understand how big this is going to be. And there's very few times when a new $1 trillion industry happens, and you look at this and you think, wow, if this opportunity, if I get into this now, either as an investor or in the industry, this is like getting into the automobile industry when it started, the internet. When I started in the .com industry in 1998, and I was able to buy, beer.com and diamond.com and creditcards.com and build them up and sell them off. I was like, oh my God, this is like so amazing. Like, this is the future of real estate. And I was seeing that. And here it is, psychedelics. It's like, if you just get in there and be involved with a good company and add value to that community, you will have something of value. Wealth will be the byproduct. And when I first got into this, 12 years ago, and I've been telling everybody in my world about it, my first job was on Wall Street. I worked for Mike Milken, the famous financier, philanthropist. And when I started telling him I was going into the psychedelic industry, maybe 5 years ago, he said, Zappy, I know you. He's like, I want to give you guidance. He said, don't go into, maybe for you, don't go into the plant and the service and that kind of thing. He goes, get some intellectual property that is good for the whole industry. And then by doing that, you will have created major value. And so I went looking for, really good IP, and I couldn't find it. And it was I felt like it was a little confrontational. Everybody's trying to, patent, psilocybin mushrooms for weight loss or for this or that. It was like, I didn't want to be in that. But I felt like these patents that Psychoceutical has, these can be used in coopetition with any company. It's just going to allow them to deliver their compound in a safer, more bioavailable way. And that's what we need. And so, the opportunity to be involved with these kind of things, to be involved with companies that are public now. Some of these companies are going to be the biotech companies of the 1990s or the pharma companies back in the 1920s. This is a huge opportunity. So if anybody's watching this, like if you're in this level, you are going to make a fortune. This is probably going to be your legacy retirement money that you get made here. And what I love is it's changing so fast. It's exponential because of the mental health crisis. So things that we thought were 5 years away are now looking like 2 years. And just as a point of reference, I saw that Michael Pollan, when he released his movie, How to Change Your Mind, he went on the Tonight Show, and he was on there, and he said, they asked, how long do you think it'll be? Stephen Colbert asked him, how long do you think it'll be? He said 5 years. And then I came out and tweeted, and I said, I think it's going to be a lot less just because of this mental health crisis. The next day, the government came out and said, we're anticipating psilocybin being, out in the next 24 months. And Michael Pollan retweeted my tweet and said, hey, Zappy, I guess you're closer on this thing. But like, that's how fast he's not even taking into account what his documentary has done to the movement, which is to get all these millions of people who are just like him, never done any psychedelics. And all of a sudden at 60 or 70, they're going to be in there. And, you think about women who are prescribed antidepressants at 4 times men. We have to get this message across, and we have to let people know that there are alternative, potentially now better opportunities for them now and coming in the future. So best time to be alive ever. And it's just awesome.
I love that we started the conversation talking about, this sad epidemic to a point in time. We're now saying at the same time, this duality exists where we have a huge opportunity in front of us to make positive impact and change. And I think you've laid out the benefits for us tremendously. Let's take a moment and talk about what are maybe some of those opportunity costs. What are some of the potential downsides? What might be rolling through some people's minds when they're like, all right, Zappy, it's not a panacea. It can't heal everything. Are you talking about, putting it in the drinking water? Like talk to me about some of that.
How far are we going here? Yeah. I mean, look, before the pandemic, when people asked me, is this for everybody? I was like, absolutely not for everyone. Post-pandemic, I think as long as you physically qualify, then there's a huge number of people who are clinically depressed right now, are having suicidal ideation, are addicted to something, because trauma, as you see I have a movie coming out with Lamar Odom called Lamar Odom Reborn, where I gave him a psychedelic intervention over a few years. And in the movie, you get to be kind of a fly on the wall as he has his first psychedelic experience with ketamine in a doctor's office. And he gets a few more, and he feels like he builds up his neural conditioning. And then I wound up going to a doctor with him down in Mexico where Ibogaine's legal. He had the Ibogaine with the doctor down there. And 48 hours after he had the treatment, he said that despite having had 12 strokes and 6 heart attacks when he was in the coma, he felt so good that he thought he could play professional basketball again. And he just trained for 6 months, and he wound up making a comeback playing for the Philippines team in Dubai. And it was like a personal rocky moment for him. But what was more special was, and you see in the movie, his mom died when he was 12 years old of cancer. And he had a young son at 6 months old pass away. And so he's just never dealt with that trauma. And so he'd do whatever he needed to do, just not to think about it, be alone, whatever it was. And it wasn't that he was addicted to this or that. It was just whatever he could dull that and not think about those people. So when he did the Ibogaine, he got to hear his mom's voice during the treatment. He heard her voice for the first time in decades. And he's like, that was so cathartic. And then you see in the movie that he got to see his son, who passed away at 6 months of age, saw him grow to be 8 or 9 years old, then to the age that he would be now as a teen. And he's like, that, to spend time with my son and is this, whatever happens in my life, I'm good. I'm not afraid of death anymore. And I shouldn't even be alive, and I'm having these incredible experiences. So I think he's really going to be the poster child for it's okay to talk about mental health.
Yeah.
And what I love about him is that he's really like focused on it from like the African American picture, where he says in the movie, in his culture, it's not even acceptable to talk about some of these things. Although I think it's really changing even now in the Michael Pollan era. I can see it evolving. You know, Aaron Rodgers come out, best football player, say he played his best football after, you know, reconnecting and getting his frequency right. And so, you know, this is affecting everybody. I just saw a thing about Jonah Hill taking time off for anxiety, and you think he's just like the happiest, funniest guy, and what could bother him. And, you know, I'd love to sit with him, because I think some of these folks, as they have these transformations that they're having, they can inspire a lot of people to, you know, take this step with confidence, because it is already, the science is there, it's very safe. It's just we have to catch people up on the education right now.
Exactly. And are you still, because it can sometimes sound like we're blurring the lines between sort of medicinal use and setting and a more, you know, recreational, free-form use and setting.
Right. I'm of the belief that you have to be in the right set and setting. That's always a very important component. Set means your mindset that you're going into it with, and your setting is who you're with and where it is. And a lot of people, when anytime they have a bad experience, it's usually because they're doing this, you know, in the wrong set and setting. There's people around, and it's not like an interior opportunity. And so that can be very disruptive. But when you're with somebody who's guiding you, and there's a lot of resources like this, if this were legal, like if Nucleus and us, you know, paint this picture properly, and this can not be taboo, there's people in every single city who could come over the phone or over to your house and, you know, guide you on your integration, or if you're having a bad experience. Because I used to go to Grateful Dead concerts when I was younger, and there was always like 10 or 15 people who would not go to the concert, but they'd stay in the tent and help people that were having some kind of bad trip that never should have been doing it with 20,000 people there and 90,000 people. It's not appropriate for these people. And this is where, you know, so the infrastructure already exists. We just have to bring it to the top. But secondly, you know, if we can study these things, then we can figure out, hey, you should take this and not this, or you need a lower dose of this because of how you process and your methylation and all these different things. So I think it's just, you know, we have to press people now. We have to say to the government right now, we're petitioning the DEA to deschedule ibogaine. We're asking for these to be approved. And people who say, well, this, you know, that's, we have to have protocols and all these things. We have a problem right now that's bigger than the potential downside of, you know, it's like the peanut allergy, okay? We didn't ban peanuts. We just tried to create an environment where those people could be tested and have an understanding and some type of barrier there, but we didn't get rid of peanuts. And if these things for mental health and addiction can be this efficacious, we have to take this technology seriously and, you know, basically reprogram, reboot people, because they've got too much coming at them and they're storing a lot of unnecessary information. And, you know, in their DNA, going back however many generations, we all have trauma in there, and even slavery and all these things. You go back far enough, every single family has this. And they proved with mice, that this stuff stays 13 generations in mice. They were showing them a purple light and then giving them a shock treatment, giving them a purple light shock treatment. Finally, they'd give them the purple light and they would just go into a PTSD in the corner, terrified, can't move. And then they watched, and the children of those mice, when they showed them the purple light, they went into trauma. The grandchildren, they went down 13 generations, they'd show them the purple light and they would be in panic. So you have all this PTSD. You have to get your frequency back to where it originally needs to vibrate. And that's what these things do. So we have this just incredible opportunity where by going into really a frequency vision of the world, that's where the healing is going to come from. And even the future of psychedelics, Margaret, is digital psychedelics, because these are just frequencies. And so I've already used some of these technologies, either patches that have frequency, no medicine, just a frequency cloned of different compounds. And you put it on your wrist, it holds it like a battery and it starts to emit, and you're getting the frequency as if you did a microdose. And there's headsets now that in the future, I got a movie coming out. It's called Frequency, the Future of Everything, basically. And in this film, you get to see that the psychedelics of the future, the medicine of the future, it's all frequency based. And so there's a company that has an app where you speak into the app for 30 seconds. It'll tell you if you have coronavirus with 95% accuracy from the frequency of your voice. And then it'll tell you what nutrients and vitamins you're deficient in from the same recording. And then you, instead of taking, like, let's say it said vitamin C, instead of eating an orange and getting the chemical reaction, which causes an electrical reaction in the brain, you just put on these headphones. It gives the frequency of the vitamin C to the brain, and it causes the reaction that you wanted without ever taking the substance. So this means this is the democratization of psychedelics. Somebody in Alaska who has no access, they're going to be able to take these frequencies in the future, and regardless of where you are, you're going to be able to access this, and they can't outlaw frequencies. So this is really the moment where that gets democratized. Energy with frequency, agriculture, they're all about to change in a big way, because we're going to see things as frequency and adjust the frequency instead of looking at it like, flesh and bones, and we're trying to get that meat to do something. It's a totally different thing. So I'm best time ever. It's insane what we get to enjoy this movie that we're watching right now.
It is, and it's exciting time, especially if you sit in a seat of being able to implement change, and affect change. And we want to think that what you're talking about from so many points is super far away, right? And kind of living in this sci-fi realm and like, okay, Zappy, but the reality is, from examples of, you said, okay, in 2045, when we reach this singularity and someone could, have the capacity to destroy a city just because their girlfriend broke up with them. Hey, look, that's happening sort of right now, right? We're seeing these episodes of kids, of young adults that have lost a job, got in a fight with their grandparents, their girlfriend broke up with them, and they are pulling out weapons and firing on innocent people, and they are destroying that. And so it's not hard to, we're not imagining anything, right? We're just saying like,
hey, well, those shooters, those school shooters and things, if they had a proper ketamine session in the right set and setting, that would not have happened. Their brain would not be working in that same way. And I want to tell you, with ketamine, it's really important. This is a suicide interrupter. That's the number one side effect, is it breaks suicidal ideation. And the reason it does it is, usually when you're going to commit suicide, you either think you have two choices: keep doing what you're doing or kill yourself. That's it. No other choice. When you go and have the ketamine treatment medically and you're in there, all of a sudden, as the chatter goes away, you start to see all these other option sets, 10 more option sets. And you're like, oh, you know what? I like doing that, which could lead to this, which could lead to, like, this is very interesting. I'm not going to kill myself right now. This is interesting. And it's just a perspective shift that people need to have right now, because especially in the pandemic, where people were cut off and afraid and lonely, and and you have all these existential risks of Kim Jong-un bombing us, or Russia, or fentanyl, or crime, or whatever. It's like the opportunity to go inside of yourself and reconnect with your original frequency, and then as things come at you, you can deal with them from that frequency and say, oh, this doesn't really resonate with me, or ooh, this does resonate with me. And so I want to tell them how I know you, your audience, if you don't mind.
I was thinking about that, how do we, because again, right, it's all about mind shifting moments. And right. So I met Zappy. He invited me on one of his vision quests for the Mind Army. And I walked into the scenario already working in the industry, but never having an experience like medicinally, right? Like considering what everyone's talking about with set and setting, right? Yeah. I have, in my 20s gone to Amsterdam and, done shrooms and had an amazing experience that's so memorable to me, even, decades later, we'll put it that way. But I didn't understand the power or what it was actually doing for me. And then I had another experience a little bit later on, just like at a friend's house on a weekend. That was a much darker experience. But again, it's because I didn't even know what it was supposed to do, right? Like, I didn't know what I should be expecting from this. And going on a desert trek, my mindset had shifted a little bit. I started to understand the medicinal properties, but I was stuck in the camp of people saying, hey, look, like, let me try to maybe imagine some trauma that I, have gone through that maybe this can help me for, I didn't want to be that girl that's just like, well, I don't know. Sometimes it's just hard to be me. And, even though I have, a great job and a great husband and great kids, and I live on a mountain and all this stuff, like the reality of it is, right? I was waking up still crying every day. I felt stuck. I felt unable to impact change. I felt like I was stuck in a cycle of hyper productivity. I talked to somebody and he talked about PTSD as a veteran. When brushing his teeth, he would feel this sense of urgency. And that resonated so much with me because it was like, even that, like, do I have to take 2 minutes for this? Okay, 2 minutes. Like, well, you better be doing squats while you're doing this 2 minutes or run through something. Like, it was this constant
push,
right? Like,
yes,
have to, and then still feeling so unfulfilled. Even while I was growing spirituality, right? So I go on this desert. I'm invited to Zappy, and not knowing you're put in this cohort with strangers, and kind of put in this situation where it doesn't force immediate intimacy, but it opens the door for you know what I mean, really close connection.
Yeah. Well, it's like, I like for me, the Mind Army wanted to do the vision tracks, and we've done a bunch of vision tracks, and we're doing corporate ones and privates and stuff now. But like that one was about, we're all really busy and we have all kinds of stuff to do, but we still have to take the time for ourselves to go inside ourselves, get back to our original frequency right now. And we took a group that included a reporter, Amanda Siebert from Forbes, Nicole Hodges, who's writing a story for Double Blind. We had a football player who won a Super Bowl ring. We had a trans person. We had all like these people, and didn't know each other. And we were like, if we go off the grid, the Mind Army wants to show society through this, that if you can go off the grid, we take these influencers, people like yourself and all these people off the grid, and we have this group experience and everything legal because these were legal psychedelics. So we have these experiences, but we're in nature and we're a collective group. And what's happened from that is people became best friends in 3 days. All kinds of business things have happened. An article in Forbes, a center that one of the people owned down in Cancun called Beyond, an ibogaine center that's doing amazing transformations of addicted people and depressed people using ibogaine. 5 or 6 people from the trip have already gone there, including the Forbes reporter, Amanda. And so this incredible camaraderie, and it's like we all elevated our consciousness and we were vibrating at this frequency that's, very high. And I think the more of these vision tracks that we can have people go on and they're vibrating, they can be part of this revolution that's happening. And I just want to tell you one thing that I know, we were in the desert and we had to battle the elements, and we wound up taking our teepee to this other area behind the rocks, and there we got the whole group cleared by the doctor, and we had this legal ketamine where everybody had their own, and we held it like a plant medicine ceremony. And it was really powerful. I've been in a lot of those with corporates and things in Silicon Valley, and the teams say that you can do, like taking your team out into the wilderness for a month, you do in 3 hours. And what we did in 3 days out in the desert, was so transformative for all of us. So it's like, you don't have to, leave the country and go to Peru if you can't, or you don't have the time. There's opportunities to go on a vision trek here in the United States, here in your local area. We just had a filming of a movie three amazing female filmmakers filmed a group session where I was, just guiding psychedelic concierging a group that they were filming with the doctor. And it was in a ranch out west here in Miami. And you think about that and you're like, wow, like you don't even have to go 5.5 hours from LA to the desert. You can do this in your own backyard. And I think that's the power of this. And when you do it with a group, I think you could probably attest to this. There's a feedback loop that you get, that you have these friends and people who've gone through this experience where, you have the ability to share with them and integrate with them, where when you're doing these things alone, you really don't have that same feedback loop. And this is a new language, new technology. So it's important not to get rid of your old friends and your family, but to make sure you have some new friends that you can integrate with along the way. And that, I love that for all of us.
Yes. And not that I'm not a paid anything for the Mind Army, but I would highly recommend it. I mean, for multiple aspects, from just a basic one, if you're considering it, growing a professional network. How do you meet people that, can kind of rate? They say it's who you hang out with, right? Is what's a good predictor of your future. And to me, like being connected to the group of people I would have never met under, another scenario. And now I can call them, part of my circle, and it's already paid dividends.
And I want to give a shout out to Dustin Robinson, because I know he's behind Nucleus and Psychedelic Invest. And I have had the best time over the last few years getting to know Dustin, having different experiences with him, talking at panels, and he really here in Miami has been that glue that's brought all these people together and these doctors. And we've all, been able to learn from each other and be a feedback loop. And so it's so critical what he's done. And then in Miami, the fact that everybody came from California and New York and realized that this is really the place to be, as far as taxes and as far as, an open thing to do whatever you want, and more open air for, pandemics and things like that. So everybody came here in the entire psychedelic industry because of, the access to Latin America and to Europe. It's really the place for psychedelic, the Renaissance. And I just think that's so exciting because we can all access it and, we can all participate. And if somebody's listening, like I said, if they just buy good companies that have funding, this is what they said at Benzinga, Mr. Wonderful said on stage. He said, if you are buying companies that have the funding to do the research in these things, these are going to be amazing investments. If you're investing in somebody who, doesn't have any money and it's just a dream, that's not good. And you look around and there's some really powerful companies that have funding. They're getting funded now. These are exciting companies for anybody watching right now. You'll probably fund your retirement and your family's legacy. They'll be like, oh, thank you, grandfather, great grandfather, that you took that opportunity where you saw that whole shift happening and you were early and you took action. So I think it's.
Yeah. And like you said, I mean, it's going to have to come from the people, right? That legislation and policy is going to lag. But we know that there's power in numbers and there is power in the people, and there's definitely power in profit. And so if we show, if we can show that, hey, there's a collective that's ready for this, that's investing in it, that's taking action on it, then it's inevitable, that.
Yes. And I want to say, people talk about, why maybe this didn't happen back in the 60s, coming back to your first question. The Vietnam War was happening. Probably the government didn't need everybody free thinking all the time and acting like a peacenik, is not, they were doing something about that. And I understand that the alcohol companies were very threatened by something that would not only replace their product, but it could also break alcoholism, that they were detrimental in this stuff being studied properly. And so, here we are, no problem going forward. We need the pharmaceutical companies because of their distribution. One day, psilocybin mushroom microdoses will replace all of the antidepressants. They will be brought to you by the pharmaceutical companies, but the frequency of that medicine is very powerful and healing. And so I think if we can embrace it together, get that critical mass, we can even figure out how to navigate what's happening there. And yeah, get that done as soon as possible, because there's no reason why, if somebody has an addiction right now, that they should go through trying to get off that and be sober. Because I see people right now trying to use traditional means to try to get sober, and they're going to meetings, and I see them at meetings I've attended with friends, and they're saying I'm sober, but they're drinking 6 cups of coffee with sugar, they're smoking their vape, they're eating a submarine sandwich, they're taking Xanax, and they're like, I got to go to a meeting in 2 hours so I don't use. I'm like, that's the worst life. I wouldn't want to live. And then instead you could do ibogaine, which cuts off the detox. You don't have to do the detox. You just do a 12-hour experience. You don't have to detox. It's said to wipe your prefrontal cortex so you don't have any cravings when you come out. And it's been shown that ibogaine, it's not a panacea, but it gives you a window, like a 90-day type window to change your lifestyle. And in that, you really can, because you're at a different frequency. And that's what this is about. So if we have everybody getting addicted through pain medications, through getting addicted through fentanyl on the street, permeating everything, we have to use this solution we have to get them off that, back into society, and the ripple effect of those people, instead of being a drain, but to be a positive, thriving force. Well, now our critical mass it's so easy. It's going to happen so fast. And not to be a downer, but I think if the government or people don't take this on right now seriously and say, we're adopting this, knowing that there's some minor safety things that we need to work out about who's, should and shouldn't, and dosing, some of that. But we know that it's better than 100,000 people a year dying of an overdose, 100,000 of suicide, escalating into the millions with fentanyl coming, and all these offshoots of it that are even more powerful than that. That if we can disrupt this using ibogaine, using these tools we have, we are going to have a thriving society, and can happen really, really quick. So I'm really hopeful. Like, this is a super hopeful time, because these things work so fast that's the amazing part. It doesn't take 6 months like a diet, or a year, or several weeks to see if an antidepressant is going to work, and then if it's going to fail and you have to take another one. These are transformations that are instantaneous, and if people are in the right setting and they're being guided properly, we have a powerful tool against mental health issues and addiction. Straight up, not even a problem. We got it.
I definitely agree. And I would say, hey, if you guys are listening and you want to be a part of this conversation, be a part of the movement, go onto the mindarmy.org. We'll put some links in there. Sign up so you can continue to stay informed and affected. I would love to continue the conversation on another special edition where we talk about what's going to happen to some of these like traditional industries, and how we create these new profit structures. How are we going to create these new systems? Because I think that's still where, right, there's some hesitation. There's some from the business community, from the medical community, from, like you said, beer, alcohol, all of these supporting industries that actually are serving off of an addicted society. And we're coming in here to say, hey, we're here to break people from addiction and give them a free life of choice. That's going to upset a lot of people. So we need to.
Well, we're all, in the past, it used to be people trying to manipulate something maybe for financial gain, but even those people at the very top, their family, their friends are being affected by addiction and depression. And so they need these things. These are people coming to me now that run major healthcare institutions, could be royalty, could be, top people in pharma and education. They're like, I need this right now for myself so I can get through this and be of service. And so I just think, that's the thing we have. And the final thought I was going to say, that's the kind of downer, is if we don't take action, some very scary things are going to happen, imagine a mass suicide online or on an app where 50,000 teens committed suicide online. That would destroy the fabric of this society, and people have already had rumblings of that. So how do we interface? We can't just wait for that to happen right now, because that's our reality. We have to disrupt it. How do you disrupt it? You change the perspective of these people, change their health and their minds. And it's a very simple thing to do. And I think my credo is basically go inside, trust nature, and don't take anything too seriously. And if you take it that way, it's going to be amazing. And I always quote the Maharishi who taught the Beatles to meditate. And he said, we have the serious responsibility to take nothing serious. And that's how I think if you walk into this with the best intent, just to expand your consciousness, live your highest purpose, and not take it seriously, it'll change in one orientation, one frequency change.
So it's like in the most times, the mind army is just you fighting against the old presets that we've all been, conditioned to believe. And so, yes, I'm a proud member. I'm excited. Thank you for this conversation. I think it was shifting on so many levels. I'm so excited for this frequency. We'll have to do another special about all of that because that is exciting information.
That is a mind blower. When I tell you about what's going on for medicine and agriculture and psychedelics on a deep dive on the frequency, it's a mind blower. And it's something that I think if people get positioned right now, this is their retirement for being early to understanding what's happening. So thanks for doing what you do. You're an awesome sharer of information and helping people to feel normalized. So I totally honor that.
Well, thank you. Thank you for facilitating change in my life. I appreciate that. And it was so impactful. And so I would say to people, we have a new quote in our household that we keep saying, fear is what makes you fall, right? And we get so scared to fall. It's the fear that makes you fall, right? If we can learn to trust ourselves and that internal compass, we'll So
yes, and I want to tell you, Timothy Leary, the great 60s icon of the psychedelic movement at the time, he said, and he was vilified for, he said, turn on, tune in, drop out. And people were very scared by that drop out. And I'm saying, I think he got it wrong. I think it's more like turn on, tune out, tune out the noise and drop in to society. And these great people, like, the Maharishi came out of a cave. He could have stayed there and just been in bliss forever, but he decided to come to the United States and train millions of people in transcendental meditation. So it's like, take your frequency that's really high level and go and tune into it, drop into it, and be the change that you want to see.
Yeah. So much. I could talk to you for days.
All right. Thank you so much. Peace.
Thank you. So again, mindarmy.org and tune into Zappy. Thank you again for your work.